Greg, I saw on your thing that you're with, I didn't realize you were with Carter.
Yeah, I serve on the board there.
Okay. I was like, I just didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's been really interesting. I came on when Worth was terminally ill, and he ended up dying that spring. But they were looking for some people with banking and finance experience and board experience. So I've been on since 2017.
oh, that's
Wow,
awesome.
that's
I don't
great.
know why I didn't realize that. That's cool. Well, your whole bio is cool. But that was one that just stood out to me because we work with them pretty closely on our end.
Oh, good,
Um,
good. Who are you
yeah.
working with?
But just with any of their lenders, they're one of our funding partners. So we, send people to them for loans, or they send people to us to get them ready.
Good, good. Well, we ought to talk about that some more sometime offline.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as we begin, Greg, I think you heard me talk about in our last Access to Capital Committee, um, we're going to develop a finance program. And so I'd love to, pick your ear about that and
Yeah,
share some of the stuff that's going on in some of our other SBDC offices in other states that I'm really curious about. But I don't know it'll work here. So I'd love to, before we start walking into the banks, right, and having these conversations, it'd be good to be a little educated before I do that.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to work with you on that. And the North Carolina SBDC has sort of that technology tag on.
That's right.
And I know, I serve on the board of the launch place, and Ava Doss has worked some with the North Carolina side because they've got offices down in the RTP.
That's right. They have small
Yeah.
business development technology centers there, which we
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have one close by. The closest, I think, I may be wrong, but I think the only one in Virginia is in Northern Virginia, the SBDTC. Yeah,
Fascinating.
all the things. So are we ready to get started, Heather?
Let's do it.
Okay. So welcome, guys, to Casual Friday. Thank you so much for watching this recorded. I know that you guys will be aren't live with us, but can't wait to hear your questions below. So when we post this, if you've got questions for us or for Greg, our guest, you can post them below and we'll make sure that we answer them. But I'm Amanda with the Small Business Development Center, and this is Heather. Hey,
Morning.
Heather. She makes all this stuff happen. She's here to keep us on track and jump in. And then what's super exciting, you guys might have seen my face talking about this on Tuesday. We posted it on social media because I was so excited to have Greg Feldman with us. He does a lot of things, but what we're going to focus on today is he's the CEO of Valley's Innovation Council. That impacts you and it's going to interest you in a lot of different ways because they work with innovation and entrepreneurship. So, Greg, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy schedule to join us and just to get in front of people so they can get to know you and what you guys are doing at Valley's Innovation Council. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda. It's my pleasure to be here. And Heather, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Greg.
So Greg's a friend of ours. We work a lot with Valley's Innovation Council on several different initiatives, but I want him to do the talking today. So Greg, tell us what Valley's Innovation Council is and what you guys are responsible for.
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Well, our mission really is to grow and strengthen the innovation economy in the region. And when we say region, we define it in the same way that Go Virginia and the Virginia Innovative Partnership Authority defines it, which is really New River Valley, Roanoke Valley, through to Lynchburg and north to the Allegheny Highlands and south through Franklin County. And so that regional footprint has a tremendous amount of innovation assets. And you think it can fall in several different buckets. You've got the research activities that go on connected with universities like Virginia Tech, Liberty, but others as well. You've got a really nice base of technology companies, some of which are homegrown, some of which are operations of national or international firms that operate in the region. And then you've got, higher ed that's producing on an average right now, we track this data as part of our benchmarking work, producing about 5,400 STEM H graduates a year in our footprint. And again, we're blessed to have a wide variety of colleges and universities of various sizes, private, public, and we're really an education mecca in many respects. And that talent pool that's coming out from those universities or stays on to do graduate work, and then things bubble out of that graduate work, like we're seeing Torque Robotics in Blacksburg as a prime example. All started really in the research efforts of the engineering program with 2 or 3 of the graduate students. And now we're seeing an announcement where they're looking to hire 350 people, and they've attracted investment from Daimler-Benz. So our swim lane, so to speak, is really the innovation space. And what we try to do is look at that and think about it in a holistic way, because really all of these elements have to be present to have companies be successful here. And so we think about this and try to approach it systematically. Meredith Hunley within Valley's Innovation Council runs our research planning and grants arm. We do a lot of benchmarking work to establish where we are today and where we have strengths and where we have gap areas programmatically or in other ways. And then we try to take some actions. We have a wonderful board, very engaged board that's plugged in a lot of different places, business, government, and higher ed especially. And in many of our board members themselves have started companies, operated them, and exited them. So we feel like we have some deep insights and understanding as to what it takes to grow a tech company in an area like this. And so we're trying to work to improve that every day. That's sort of job one, mission one for us.
That is so fantastic. And for you guys who are watching, I know a lot of you guys are in the technology and innovation space. We have a lot of Main Street companies too that is in our audience. And I wanted to just point out for them, and why I think this is so important for them too, the more technology we keep here and build these companies up, that is more people spending money in small business. And so it's important throughout the entire ecosystem. So it's not just relatable to innovation and technology, although that's what you guys are responsible for. It impacts the entire area and the region across so many different facets. And that's what's so fascinating about all this. So you guys reach all the way into Lynchburg. That's awesome. We get to do a lot of work with them and love our office there in Lynchburg. And I know that you guys are starting to build more and more there. So Greg, tell me about, you guys have an innovation and entrepreneurship kind of coalition that brings in a lot of people from the community. Tell me a little bit more about that and what you guys are doing.
Yes, that's a dimension of a program that we are running on behalf of the Go Virginia Region 2 Council, which is called the Regional Entrepreneurship Initiative. And one of the things as we approach that work, the end goal of that work is to identify those projects, 4 to say 6 projects in the region that would give us the most boost. Where should strategic investment be made to really drive innovation and entrepreneurship in the region? And when you think about the geographic spread of this region, and the assets are homogenous, every area has its own industry cluster strengths and its own university and embedded business sector strengths, et cetera. We felt like just trying to come at it from a single sort of top-down approach was not the right thing to do. So what we did was, Amanda, is we set up an innovation and entrepreneurship coalition in the New River Valley, the greater Roanoke Valley and Allegheny Highlands area, and in the greater Lynchburg area as the 3 kind of major sub-markets, if you will, of our region. Layered on top of that, and membership is really coming from the 3 individual coalitions, is a regional council. And the notion of it is all this. At the sub-market level, those people that are running organizations supporting entrepreneurship and innovation in a given region have eyes and feet on the street to understand what their strengths and gap areas are. And they're best situated to lift up, what should we do to strengthen what's uniquely possible here? For example, in the Roanoke Valley, the presence and the growing presence of Fralin Biomedical Research Institute and the collaboration between Tech and Korean and Radford's presence now with the former Jefferson College of Nursing, that creates sort of a life science and health bevy of activity that should and could be leveraged in some way. And the people working in this area are understanding what those opportunities are and are best positioned to lift up through the coalition process ideas. And we as Valley's Innovation Council will take the collection of ideas, develop resource plans around that, and deliver a report back to the Go Virginia Council that says, here are the things at the sub-market level. But we also, and the reason we put the regional council or group together was because we're seeing some universal themes emerge. For example, access to capital is probably a common lament no matter where you are, even throughout the whole state. So rather than try to tackle something like that at a sub-market level, that's probably something we really need to be thinking about at a regional level, and what kind of programming can and should we be doing. And that regional I&E group is our mechanism, if you will, to look at those region-wide issues and give some thought and perspective back to us on how that should be addressed. And longer term, even post-grant, we're hoping that these coalitions become a way, an infrastructure that continues forward beyond the life of the grant. So one of our main missions as VIC is to connect and collaborate. And I think, the more we can get people in the room that share common goals and ideas, and we figure out how we can leverage off of one another and not work in silos is a big key to the region's success long term.
Absolutely. I know, and Heather's been involved in them as well, and our whole team. We've been very appreciative of it. It's helped us reduce redundancies and start to collaborate more with others that before we hadn't been. So, even outside of the regional level, even at service agencies like ourselves, it's just been incredibly impactful. So I appreciate you guys leading the charge on that.
Thank you for that.
You talked about access to capital, so I want to roll into that because it's such a hot topic in our area. And one of our roles at the SBDC is to help people get capital, whether it's a loan, investment, depending on what stage they're in and what they're doing, where we need to look for that capital. But we know that it's a challenge oftentimes. We were all having a conversation before we went live about this, and I'd love to talk just a little bit about the Access to Capital Committee and the fact that there's entrepreneurs on it, which I love, and then talk a little bit about what's going on in our region with capital and access.
Sure, and thank you for that question, because it's without capital, most companies can't grow and scale, at least at the rate and speed that would be ideal to capture the opportunity, right? And so access to capital for me personally has been an issue I've looked at since the mid-1980s when I first got involved with venture capital activities through Dominion Bank Shares. And what we have, if you look at a macro level in this country, about 75 cents of every venture capital dollar gets distributed in a relatively narrow group of places around the country, the Bay Area, Boston, Austin, Chicago, New York, et cetera. And the good opportunities can exist anywhere, but how do you get, since there's such gravitational pull in places like, say, Silicon Valley, where Sand Hill exists and the venture capital world exists, how do you make sure that good opportunities get funded? So we started, as is sort of VIC's normal modus operandi, with a study, the Capital Landscape Study, which was funded by Go Virginia. And we looked at, over a long period of time, the actual activity that fell across several buckets. One important bucket for early stage companies are grants, particularly if you're in an arena where you're developing a highly engineered product that takes a long time, or life science therapeutic or something like that. So, access to grants is an important early funding source for many of these companies. We looked at angel activity. We looked at formal, what I would call institutional venture capital activity. And we compared ourselves with what we deemed to be some peer regions like Birmingham, Greenville, South Carolina, Chattanooga, Charlottesville, et cetera. And what we found was that we do really well. We led those other peer areas in terms of companies accessing things like small business innovative research grants or STTRs. In fact, in our study period, over $100 million had come in to a number of companies here in the region. Where we get thin or more episodic is in angel activity and venture capital activity. And if you had a graphical image of this before the audience today, you would see these peaks and valleys activities where somebody has landed a big funding in a given year, but then there's sort of nothing going on practically in the subsequent year. So when we get data like that, how we try to turn it into actionable things, first, you alluded to the Access to Capital Committee, which Sam English and Keith Hartman are co-chairing, and we have a number of people involved to take this data and look at what do we do about it and how do we improve pathways and channels to access. We're fortunate that Virginia Tech and Korean formed the Seed Fund and the Innovation Fund, which is an important thing to have as local, local presence. And then we have helped the Commonwealth Angel Group, that had been operating, but we've tried to lend a little assistance to facilitate and formalize some things so people that have good ideas that we think can get some traction amongst the angel group here. So all those elements, it's building blocks, and there's a need to have access to a continuum of, companies that get into the ramp cohort have been getting about $20,000. And that's an important piece. Access to, CIT does a nice job promoting SBIR and STTR workshops, and there are some upcoming that I know you and your listeners are aware of. But making sure that people know that those kinds of grant opportunities are out there, and then having an active angel group. There are a little over 100 people that have been assembled. We operate as sort of a confederation, meaning that individual angels make their own individual decisions. We don't have a dedicated fund, but we are seeing some companies getting funding through that mechanism, and we often syndicate and participate with James Ramey and what he's doing with the VTC Seed Fund and Innovation Fund. So all of those things are building blocks that need to be in place, and having a local presence to give companies a place to start for that kind of equity capital. We're not talking about bank finance or microfinance or things like that. Most, especially tech companies, are dependent on equity sources as opposed to going to a bank and saying, "Hey, will you fund my R&D?" Banks not really structured to do that. So I think it's an ongoing and a major issue for a lot of areas, ours included, and we are going to continue to be, will be, and it is today, one of the focus areas of our activities.
People may not know this that are watching, but I know we've talked about, and we see a lot. We have some really cool things going on in the region, and getting them access to capital is key to keeping them here, right? Like we can do the research grants, which I know we're really strong in. But if we can't continue that with equity and financing down the road to even expand, it's really hard to keep folks here. So I know that that's a top issue for all of us, and I'm so glad that Valley's Innovation Camp, there's someone with their thumb on it saying, okay, let's coordinate this and make sure that we're all working in the same direction. It's so critical for entrepreneurs out there.
And just one final point on that before we leave this subject. One of the current work activities that we have going on is helping to map sources. And we use the Valley's Innovation Council website. We're trying to position it to be the entrepreneurial front door for the region. And, our calendar of events, we've got sort of a work in progress right now where we're trying to map things like there are multiple revolving loan funds. Each one of them have their own criteria of what they will or won't fund, and their own points of contact and dollar ranges, et cetera. So in our, what I'll call our minimum viable product stage of development, we've got little flags, and somebody could hover over that on the interactive map and it'll pop up some background information. We're going to do the same thing with our kind of in-state and in-region capital sources on the equity side, so that people will have at least a running start of who's out there. Because for many people, especially I would say most entrepreneurs, haven't had capital raising experience and may not be networked into who's sort of on point with the angel group, or who's the point of access, and how do I even get into in front of a VC. There are barriers out there that sometimes you don't even realize exist for some of these folks.
Absolutely. Anytime we highlight, sometimes we follow along our clients that we assist in opening, and they may have investment. The number one question we get from other people who know that and see that, we recently did a video series on one, is, well, how did they know? How did they know where to go? And almost always the answer is, I knew someone, like I knew them beforehand. And so I'm really excited that we're taking a step to get that more accessible for people, just to be aware and know where to go, who to go, and how to do that. And that's something that we want to get involved in as well, especially around the literacy part of that, of like, how do you get prepared to do that? What do you say? What does all that look like? Because it's critical to making it happen, especially with, we're not in San Francisco where there's thousands of VC firms, and you get 20 no's a day, right? Like that just doesn't happen here. So you got to get it right. So we talked about those two things. I want to know, what do you think do you think capital is the biggest hurdle for our entrepreneurs in our region? What do you think is the biggest hurdle?
Well, I think there's several. I think capital is one, and corollary to that you just alluded to is the technical assistance necessary to prepare someone, because it is a process. You can't just show up and expect somebody to make a decision. There's a due diligence process involved, even once you get past the kind of what I'll call the sniff test of, yes, it meshes with our areas of interest investing wise, and we think you have something novel and unique, et cetera. So it is, the technical assistance is definitely rising to the top. We're afoot right now. We haven't collated all the data, but we, as you know from working with our coalitions, we have done a survey at the what I'll call the I&E organizational level or across the footprint, to get input into what the perception is for undermet or unmet needs. And then we followed that up more recently with an entrepreneurial survey of companies across the region, and we're just closing that down right now. And so beyond the sort of capital access and technical assistance, what I'm seeing emerge, and again, this is not collated data yet, but areas like access to talent and scaling, and if you're building out a team, again, this is an early stage kind of setting, how do I find that CTO or head of business development, or and we are seeing, even from more mature companies, access to middle management and more senior people, because it's wonderful that we produce 5,400 STEM-H graduates, but as a practical matter, a company can only absorb so many sort of fresh outs that can bring no experience to the table. So how do you find that person that has 5 to 20 years experience, whether they're technical and it's a programmer, or someone that you're bringing onto your research team, or whether it has that individual has that experience with, yes, I can open up the channels in these markets because I've done it before, et cetera. Bringing that talent to bear is another one that we're seeing often commented upon. And actually, while the pandemic is horrible, if there's any silver lining for places, I think, like where we live, which is a wonderful place to live, is that there's a greater dawning that, hey, I know, even the big tech companies are saying, they'll probably not go back to the same way they clustered their workforces in, big buildings in 2 or 3 places around the country or whatnot. There's going to be a greater distribution. And I think on the flip side, people are realizing, it's great to live in a big city for a while, but, now I'm raising a family and I'm seeing that I could do the same work just as effectively from my home as I could from my small apartment in New York City that I'm paying, $3,000 or $4,000 a month to live in. And I could have, a grand house in a place like Blacksburg or Roanoke or Lynchburg or, any parts in between. So I actually think we have some ability, if we position ourselves correctly, to market and lure some of that talent back, because we have a lot of graduates that are in the diaspora out there that are familiar with this area. And I think if we shine the light on what opportunities exist, perhaps we attract some of those people back.
Absolutely. And I love that concept. And Greg, you make me think about an article that I just read. My background's in commercial design. And I just read an article from two of the largest architecture firms in the nation, really the US, one of them, did a study on what does this new, space requirement look like for companies who are realizing we don't need one big building or 3 headquarters. We need, one place where we convene, but then we need these kind of, they call them modules or pods out in areas like our region, right? Smaller places to work so that people who want to live elsewhere can and aren't forced to live in expensive districts and things like that. So I was fascinated by that. And it goes right back to what you're saying. This area is prime to be available and open for that. So I'm excited to watch all that happen. Not only from the tech talent side, but also space, because I love that portion of it. So when you were talking about, and I know we're getting ready to run up on 10:30, we're probably going to go a couple minutes over because there's 2 more things I want to talk to you about. But you talked about, building out the team. Another thing that we see a challenge is even if you do find the right people or the right people, how do you pay them, right? And so understanding the structure and the business modeling and how equity works and all of that, the literacy around that is incredibly important. And I know we see a lot of people and talk about that and bring people like you and Sam English and others into that conversation to help people make those decisions. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and that seems to be on the radar. Obviously, we're not going to address things that aren't showing data that says that they're a problem. So I love hearing that is on the list as an issue. Okay, we talked about, and I think my next question was, what are you doing about those hurdles, right? But we've already talked about all that. We're putting the structure in place, and I wanted to bring people back to make sure you check out valleysinnovation.org. That's the website, right?
Yeah,
really cool stuff on there. There's reports, but there's also news, there's events that they kind of collect from all over the region that are incredibly helpful for entrepreneurs and anyone interested in the innovation space, including, private investors, right? Like, it's just a great resource of information. And we'll make sure when we share this recording that we'll link to that website, because it's just one that you need to have bookmarked and that you're actively going to. Just spend some time on there looking through these reports, because they're fascinating, and you guys have done a great job of making them a little interactive so that you can click on what you want to see and it comes to life. So you guys make sure to check that out if you haven't already, and we'll share it with you. So Greg, what haven't we talked about that you want to share that could be important or helpful?
So I just want to sort of maybe have an end date around sort of collaborating. And when we do our work and we find areas of need, we're always looking at who's out there that is best positioned to partner and drive actionable results at the end of the day. And so, we did a study of area employers that lifted up needs in the IT and software development space specifically, as an example. And, right now, the Roanoke Blacksburg Technology Council has partnered with Next Up and a couple of other parties to put forward a grant that will create an internship, apprenticeship model for students and in workforce people that want to get involved with local companies that, effectively don't have their own internal infrastructure necessarily to be able to run a training program. So, this model has been in place. Next Step has been running it through their acceleration program in Blacksburg for about 10 years. And, actual live projects are fed to the group. They have a senior software engineer that Next Step supplies, for example, in overseeing the project. And then that group of interns or apprentices execute on that and deliver something back out. So that does several things. If you go back to this talent pipeline issue, you were taking juniors and seniors in college that are in computer science disciplines, for example, and giving them practical experience. On the flip side, we're also connecting the dots with local employers that might be otherwise farming that project out of the region, overseas, perhaps even. And they're getting the work done here, but more importantly, they're getting visibility, and the interns are getting visibility on real work opportunities that might exist here. And they're having wonderful success in their history of running the program at Tech. They've had 100% hire rate, and the percentage of people that stay past a year is much higher than the industry average. And the reason for that is because both sides have had some visibility on one another, and both sides know what they're getting as part of the bargain here, right? So I think those kinds of, that's not an expertise we could necessarily bring directly. And we're not looking to be the executor or operator of, we don't have the resources or expertise to do that. So, but I think collectively, just like what you all do so well, partners like Next Step, which is a private sector partner, there are other higher ed partners, et cetera, that I think if we're talking, going back to these coalitions and the reason for these coalitions, if we're talking together, we're going to figure out better ways to work together. And hopefully that drives end results that are good for everybody. So I just use that as a current example in sort of the collaboration world of a way that we take something from a study period through an actionable step that hopefully, now is going to see 50, 60 people come through a program that are connected with employers. And hopefully that's a model that can be replicated in the future.
Absolutely. That's exciting. I didn't know about that one. And I might have to talk to you about using those resources.
Yeah.
We oftentimes find ourselves having to go out of the region for things that we need, particularly around technology. And there's also a lot of sleeping tech talent here in town where, before tech talent was such a thing, a lot of our middle-sized companies, have CTOs on staff, or they have, someone that's heading up an IT department who would probably like to get involved in more creative pursuits. But, how do you know about those? They're not always jobs posted, right? Especially if you're looking at startups and innovation, tech companies who are still doing research and kind of building out their team. So it's all fascinating to hear and learn about.
Just on that theme quickly, one of the things that's upcoming is the Ramp Demo Day, which is going to be October 15th. And, this year, obviously it always focuses on the current cohort, but we'll be doing this virtually, but we will have some little flashpoints about some of our graduate companies and what they're doing. And, we're probably going to be doing a distributed meeting. We'll have some spots that people can come and social distance and watch remotely. This will be filmed and delivered by that mechanism. But that would be one opportunity for people just to, like you were describing, that could plug in just to become aware of some of the interesting and cool things that are emerging out of the whole acceleration effort.
I'm glad you brought that up. So for you guys who are watching, it's a really cool event to watch and to listen to these companies talk about what they're doing. And it's cool that you're going to bring back, I guess, alumni, right? Like cohorts that have gone through it to talk about where they're at now. It's one of my favorite things to do every year is to hear from these folks. So October 15th, as that becomes near and we know more information, we'll make sure to get it out to you guys so that, especially when it's virtual, it's just so much easier to join in and watch
Right.
than having to come in person. So we'll share that because that's an exciting day and fun. And I'd love to hear how you guys are doing it this year. That's going to be marked on my calendar as soon as we get off. I knew it was coming up soon. Okay, well, we're at 10:35, so we're going to end. Greg, we will share the website with you guys because I want you to check that out. And Greg, just so appreciative of your time. You are a tremendous asset to our region, and we're just really glad to have you looking at all this stuff and kind of having your eye on the ball, especially with your experience. It's just a plethora of experience that you bring to the table. So we're excited to have you here, and thanks for doing all that you do for the region.
Well, thank you, Amanda and Heather. It's been a pleasure to be with you this morning. I appreciate being invited.
Absolutely.
Happy Labor Day.
All right. We'll see you guys in a few Fridays.
All righty. Take care.